I call this meeting to order. This is a regular meeting of the Northfield Public School Board. Today is Monday, February 28th, 2022, and the time is 6 p.m. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded. The recording of this meeting will be posted on the district website as soon as possible. Before we get started, I'd like to thank members of the public for attending this school board business meeting to observe the work being done on behalf of all school district stakeholders. We appreciate the time you took to be here this evening. Right, Dr. Hillman, we have some items in the table file.
Yes, we have several items in the table file this evening. We have a presentation to accompany the Arcadia Charter School contract renewal presentation by their director, Laura Stelter. We have a gift agreement, and then there are several personnel items, appointments increase, decrease, change in assignment, leave of absence, and some retirements. I do want to point out that in the board packet itself, not the agenda, but in the actual memorandum, there was just an incorrect numbering. So you'll notice that there are two number 7s in the memorandum, not in the agenda. The agenda is fine, but I just want to point that out to board members that we had that error so that you're able to follow along as such. And that's it.
Okay, very good. Okay, if there are no objections, we will add these items to the agenda as we move forward. Okay, is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented? Moved by Jeff, second by Amy. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we are now on to the public comment portion of our meeting. We do have one person signed up. Okay, this is an opportunity for residents, business, and property owners, parents, guardians, students, and employees of the Northfield Public School District to address the board. All comments to the board must adhere to the guidelines set in place by District Policy 206 regarding public comment. This is not a time to debate an issue, but only for the board to hear your comments. You are prohibited from making comments about specific students, staff, and administrators. The board respects and values input, but when it relates to a specific individual or to a specific matter, this input must be heard by the appropriate personnel, including the building principal or superintendent, and not during an open meeting of the school board. You will be gavelled out of order if your comments are not in compliance with these guidelines. Please address the board from the podium. After being recognized by the board chair, identify yourself and if you represent a group. We require that you limit your remarks to 3 minutes. You are not allowed to yield your time to another person. It is expected that all members of the public will address their remarks with civility and respect. Personal attacks by anyone addressing the board are unacceptable. The board has allotted up to a total of 30 minutes for public comment at regular school board meetings. I will now begin to call those who have signed up to speak in the order in which they signed in. And Vice Chair Amy Gurwitz will be monitoring the speaker's time. She will signal each speaker with the time they have remaining at 1 minute, 30 seconds, and 10-second intervals. Again, please make your comments as brief as possible, but no more than 3 minutes. Our first speaker tonight is Harley Jensen. Welcome.
Thank you. Can I start? Can you hear me? All right, I'll go ahead and start. Good evening. My name is Harley Jansen. I'm a parent in the Northfield School District, and I'd like to lay out a few things that I want to share. Number one, I firmly believe in respectful discourse and the importance of sharing different perspectives. Number two, I'm a tireless advocate for children. Besides having 5 children, we have been a foster home to close to 50 kids. Number three, I believe education is extremely important. It is truly the great equalizer, and it's something that should be fought for and protected. Number four, I wholeheartedly believe that masks and contact tracing are barriers to education, especially when data shows that children are among the least affected. This thing has been political. Number five, when I'm done with my 3 minutes, I'm going to give a call to action in which I'm going to ask you to take a recess and speak with me as a parent. Clearly, this board can take recesses when it benefits the narratives that you all intend to project. And my ask is take a recess and talk with a real parent. Throughout the last year, there have been many challenges, especially the implementation of policies that create barriers to education. As I spoke against these barriers, I was reminded many times that I have choices and different educational opportunities for my kids. We have enacted on all the choices that we are capable of enacting on, even though it has been at significant inconvenience and cost. My 4 older kids have had changes in education, switching to Portage to an online academy at our own cost, enrolling in 2 of them into Randolph, where we have to drive both ways to a bus stop, all of this at an inconvenience. However, my youngest son is different. His in-womb experience is not good. He was exposed to things no child should be exposed to, and it had an effect on him. He is different from the rest of us in several ways. He has a different skin color, different biological parents, and he has different sensory needs. The best choice for him was to be enrolled in early ventures and hand-in-hand preschool. Unfortunately, the last 18 months, unnecessary policies have prevented him from getting the services that this school system, the state of Minnesota, and the state of Iowa all believe he should receive. And maybe more apparent was that he was treated differently. Due to the challenges he has, he cannot wear a mask. And because of the unnecessary policies enacted by the school, he has been contact traced and quarantined 4 times. That's well over a month out of the services he needs. And because of the needs he needs to be in 2 different classrooms. Initially, the unnecessary policies would not allow him to switch classrooms, causing him to miss out on services. His quarantine rate is twice as high as his peers. And again, that's because he's different. He's not medically fragile. He's never been sick during these times. And using the data from the CDC, he is more at risk to be injured from a car accident than he is from COVID. And what's maybe worse is that if it was one of my light-skinned, more academically advanced, with less sensory need kids, he would have never missed any time. That's 0 time. So my ask is take a recess, talk to a real parent with 5 children that should be in your school district, and specifically talk how the unnecessary policies have discriminated against my 1 kid that's different.
Thank you, Mr. Jensen. Okay, we are moving on to announcements and recognitions. Dr. Hillman, is there?
Yes, we have several announcements and recognitions this evening. We want to share with you that Hand in Hand Preschool, Early Ventures Learning Center, and the Early Childhood Family Education Center will hold an open house and their summer and fall registration night this Thursday, March 3rd at the Northfield Community Resource Center. Is that right, Anita? I'm making sure. Community Resource Center, okay? From 5, I think that's the Community Ed Center. We'll clarify that. I'm guessing they're having it at the Community Ed Center, and this is just a copy from a previous year's announcements. From 5:30 to 6:30, it is at the NCEC because families can tour the building, see classrooms, and meet staff. So Hand in Hand Early Ventures and Early Childhood Family Ed at the Northfield Community Ed Center, Thursday, March 3rd, 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. I have several activities related announcements that I just want to share with you this evening. To start off, the superintendent always loves to share when the Knowledge Bowl team goes to state. And if you're not familiar with how Knowledge Bowl works, there are several teams from each school of a handful of students. And so multiple teams get to go to the state tournament. Northfield swept the top 4 spots, and the top 3 will go to state, which is in April. So congratulations to Knowledge Bowl. We want to congratulate boys swim and dive that you might remember they placed 3rd in the swim and dive true team tournament about a month ago. And on this past weekend, they took 2nd in the region, and they are sending in the individual swimming and diving state tournament. They're sending 3 relay teams and 6 individuals headed to state. So congratulations to boys swim and dive. We have that the Northfield High School wrestling team continues to make history. They have advanced as a team to the state tournament, which is this Thursday. And then they have also sent 11 individual wrestlers to the state tournament. That is a record. So congratulations to Coach Staub, who is also the regional coach of the year, the section coach of the year. Just an outstanding season for Northfield High School wrestlers, and just a whole bunch of people headed to state, which is fun. Finally, I want to congratulate Northfield High School senior Maggie Malika. She is the goalie for the Northfield High School girls hockey team. In the first round of the State High School League playoffs, she had 55 saves against Edina. Quite a performance. The Raiders did not make it past the first round in terms of did not advance in the tournament. But 2 really special things for Maggie is she was named the senior goalie of the year for the state of Minnesota. Quite an accomplishment for Maggie. And then in addition, she was named the Class AA Herb Brooks Award winner. And the Herb Brooks Award is one of the most prestigious awards that any hockey player can win in the state. So I just want to read briefly from the State High School League press release. So Northfield senior goalie Maggie Malika was selected the recipient of the Class AA Herb Brooks Award on Saturday, February 26th at the Xcel Energy Center. The annual award is presented to a state tournament participant that strongly represents the values, characteristics, and traits that defined Herb Brooks, a St. Paul native that gained international fame as a hockey coach. The award commemorates the unending influence that Brooks had on the sport of hockey, not just in Minnesota, but throughout the world. So congratulations to Maggie on her outstanding career as a Northfield Raider. And we wish her luck as she moves on to Division I hockey in the future. So congratulations to all of those student athletes and activities participants.
Excellent. Any other announcements from board members or recognitions? Julie?
I just wanted to mention, I know we spoke about it at the last meeting, but the all-school art show that was hosted at the Northfield Arts Guild, and it's continuing to have it in their gallery. And they had an open house on Saturday, and it was really, really fun. Lots of people were there. We have Andrea Sojin, the Northfield Arts Guild director, super passionate about working with our district and our students, and just did an outstanding job. And of course, the efforts we have to acknowledge of our district art staff to pull that together. So it was a really outstanding day. And that show does continue for during Northfield Arts Guild's gallery hours for anyone who missed it.
Excellent. Anyone else? Announcement, recognition? I wanted to just recognize and applaud the middle school, high school concert that I was able to attend on Saturday. It was absolutely terrific. So much talent, and thankful for Mr. Eastman and Miss Bendit. Okay, we're going to move on to our items for discussion and reports. We have 4 presentations tonight, and we begin with Sal Bagley, partner at Wald Architects and Engineers, with a presentation on the task force and process in place to study the needs at the Northfield High School. Welcome, Sal.
Thank you. Can you hear me? All right. Thank you for having me, Dr. Hillman, Chair Gonzalez-George. We are thrilled to be here and talk about the process that's been set forth. I also have Josh Cooper from Knutson Construction here in case there are any questions for him. So we are here to talk about the proposed purpose statement for that task force and the process that we've been going through so far on what timeline looks like going forward. If anyone does not know, I'm Sal Bagley. I've been working with the district since 2018. So we helped execute the successful 2018 bond referendum projects and have now turned our attention towards the needs at the high school. When it comes to the overall master plan process, here is a timeline. So we've been in the data gathering phase since late last year. So we've been putting together a facility condition study with Knutson Construction and Cole Nelson and his team about what parts of the building are in condition in need of replacement. So the systems, the finishes, the materials, the components. We've also been working with the business office about the enrollment study and how that compares against the capacity of the building. And then we started the input gathering process. And then in the past month, we've been doing a lot of preparation for the task force. So we've had a variety of listening sessions. I'll go over that on a further slide. The task force has been made contact with, or many of the potential members of the task force. And then obviously tonight, we're here to have you commission the task force work officially. In the next couple of months, we would propose that the task force meet approximately 4 times. They would evaluate and establish and prioritize the needs that have been set forth for the high school, talk about any potential solutions, and work to prepare a recommendation to bring back to you all. I believe that's been slated tentatively to come to your May 23rd, I think, school board meeting, so that you could receive a task force recommendation that evening and have any questions and further study for a July and August preparation to go out for a potential bond election. So as you may know, there are timelines and procedures that have to be put in place anytime you want to go for an election. So we're working to set the district up for a potential November 22 referendum if that's the board's choosing. Here is a more detailed timeline about the master planning process. So as you can see, we've been having some oversight committee meetings about every 2 weeks. So that's with the building administration and the district administration and Walden Knutson, and we've been having those since late November. Like I said, we've been doing the kind of examination of the building for a couple of months and all of our input gathering meetings. Then you can see about a third of the way down the slide, the community process, that task force. At meeting 1, we're proposed to be mostly an informational meeting in nature so they can learn about the needs of the building, ask any questions, and then we really get into a cadence with them of talking about those needs, prioritizing those needs, and what can be done to solve them. That would bring us to the May 23rd, 2022 task force recommendation to you all. Then we would leave some time and space just for board process. You can see we've got a couple potential dates and times in the late May and June timeline for you all to have work sessions if you were to need them. From a statutory perspective, you do need to file or adopt a resolution to go to election 74 days before that election. So you'll see that August 26th is really the last day that you could choose to file to go out to a referendum. And I would recommend that you submit a review and comment actually a little sooner than that to the Department of Ed. So about 90 days is what I would recommend. So you can see August 20th is the last day we'd recommend that. And all of that would be gearing up towards a November 8, 2022 election. And just a good reminder for everyone is that early voting would begin on September 23rd. So about 46 days in advance of the election. So big picture, that's where we're at in the process. When it comes to the listening sessions that we've been having over about the past month, there have been quite a few. So you can see on February 2nd, we came here and had conversations with many of the departments from the district office, including instructional services, child nutrition, special education and student services, and technology and IT. That evening, we also did do an activities listening session that ended up being mostly athletic focused. So we did do a separate drama and music one later in the month. Then we came to the all staff meeting on February 7th and broke into small groups for staff to be able to give just kind of broad input. The following day, we processed that input with the department heads and gathered further feedback. On February 14th, just a couple of weeks ago, we did a deep dive into the condition of the building with Cole Nelson and his buildings and grounds team who know the building well. And then we also had a couple of other kind of drop-in times for staff to come give input. So on February 18th and the 24th, we were just posted up in the media center and had people come drop by and give us casual feedback. And we did walk around during flex time and get some more as well. To round it out, we had a community education meeting just this past Monday to talk about the many ways in which community education utilizes the district's facilities. And then that day we did have a drama and music listening session since we didn't have that during the activities. And then last but not least, I see some friendly faces in the background because we met with the district youth council just last week on Wednesday, and I recognize some of those folks. So there's been a lot of listening going on in the past month. And I think the task force has got their tasks set out for them to prioritize those and evaluate what can be done. Before I keep going, are there any questions on process thus far? Process or timeline? All right. Certainly we can come back to that. So when it comes to what's being asked of you this evening, we've been working with that project oversight committee meeting to set forth a purpose statement for the task force. Anytime you bring the public together and ask for their input, I think it's it's good practice to put any potential parameters around their study so that it's really clear what you're asking of them, so that when they give their recommendation to you in May, that that there's not any challenges with that. So we've been working on this proposed charge and guiding principles. So I will go through this, and then I think this is the basis of our discussion tonight. So what's being asked, big picture, is to develop a facilities master plan for the high school that will best serve the district's educational goals, be financially attainable and sustainable, that reflects the values and priorities of the many communities of your district, to accommodate your enrollment and programs that are hosted at that building, to cover anticipated needs for the next 20 years, as well as recognize major issues beyond that time frame, be consistent with the strategic plan, and recommend optimal use of facilities. So that's what the task force will be charged with, essentially, is that's the basis of their work. When it comes to communication with the public about the task force, here's kind of an overview of why the task force is being put together. So task force is being formed to study Northfield High School and make a recommendation for a facility master plan. You've been studying the needs at the high school for quite some time, and the task force will be asked to assess and prioritize them and make a recommendation back to the board as to how to best address them. Things that the task force will do to come to that conclusion or come to that recommendation is understand and quantify the capacity of the building, especially as it relates to all of its programs and community education, understand the facility maintenance needs and recommend priorities, as well as address capital and operational costs. The end goal or outcome of the task force is for you all to have a master plan for the Northfield High School facility that accommodates your needs and is financially responsible over the next 20 years. The task force, we've been working to shape the, obviously in that overall master timeline when it would make sense to meet with the task force. About every 2 weeks is a good cadence for work to be put together between meetings and any study to be done. So the task force is proposed to start in just a couple of weeks, actually on Thursday, March 17th, and then meet approximately every 2 weeks on Thursday evenings from 6 to 8 p.m. If we need any additional meetings, we'll work to fit those into the schedule. And we've also talked about offering a tour of the building to task force members before or after one of those meetings if they have not taken a tour in some time. We've talked about meeting in the media center, and then again, obviously coming back to this group on Monday, May 23rd. I think with that, I'd love to take any questions or any discussion topics, or if I missed anything.
Thank you, Sal. Dr. Hammond, do you want to make some comments?
Yeah, I just
first?
want to make a couple of comments here. First of all, we are really grateful to be able to have the expertise of Wold and Knutson. They have really gotten to know the district through the elementary projects. We've built a trusting relationship with them. They understand our goals, they understand what we're looking at, and they are able to really give us some expert testimony, if you will, about the condition of the current high school and as we move forward. There are a couple of things that I want to just be very clear about. You saw a timeline that includes a potential November 22 election. I want to be extremely clear. That's not what we're recommending at this point. But we want to have that option on the table should that be something that you desire to consider. So as Sal explained, there are some specific timelines that we need to be able to have with any bond election. And so we want to make sure that we're able to do that. Any bond election moving forward in November is going to be different, in my opinion, than previous bond elections. What we've seen is we've seen a dramatic increase in the number of people who participate in things like early voting. So if you think about all other school district bond referendum campaigns in the past, they typically would wait until September until they start, people come back to school. But we know that people are starting to vote as early as September, right, in some cases. So as we think about anything for the future, I want to be clear, we're not recommending that. We are simply giving you the tool, should that be something that the task force recommends and you were to deem appropriate to begin the community, that option is on the table. The second piece that I want to be clear about is that I have given some explicit direction initially to this task force. It is very simple when you have a building that you're looking at modifying to just say, well, let's just go with something new. And the issue is that we've been down that road before. We know that we have talked with the community about a new building before. I'm not saying that it's not an option, right? I'm not saying that option is off the table for you to consider, because as the board, you have the chance to be able to say what you think would best address the issues that the task force brings to light. But the direction that I have given has been about a renovation and or addition to the existing facility. When you go down the road of addition and renovation, it forces people to really think deeply about the existing facility and site and to be very creative in how they approach those kinds of problems. And so we know we have numerous issues that need to be addressed at Northfield High School. The matter is, how do we do that? And so I just want to be clear about what I have given, as some parameters to the task force in addition to what Sal has shared. And then to be very, very clear to the folks here in the audience and on the live stream, that this doesn't mean that we are going to have a bond referendum election in November. It means that we are setting up that if that is something that you as a board deem appropriate, you have the tools to make that happen. What we're creating is we're updating our master facilities plan. If you think about it, we did our last master facilities plan in 2017. That spawned the 2017 election. We came back in 2018 after not passing the bond question and bringing the elementary portion back, which passed. And so it's time to update the master facility plan, which really now is about the high school. So that is what this task force is going to do. So I appreciate the opportunities to provide a couple of framing comments for it before board members ask Sal questions.
Thank you. All right, board members, questions or comments? All right, Tom.
So do you have any preliminary analysis or whatever of the state of the current high school?
Oh boy, I tried to recap all of the needs in 20 minutes last week, and I don't know how well I did because we've done maybe, 30 hours of listening so far. But if I had to say, I think that actually what we started with was asking people what their favorite parts of the building were and why. And the kind of the bright spots in the building of flexibility are obviously highly loved and utilized. So we hear from students, we hear from staff about the areas in the S wing, for example, and places where you've taken out lockers and put in a counter and how transformational that's been, and a real push for more of that. I think I'd be remiss to not mention the demand for additional activity space and the challenges that you have from a daytime scheduling and an evening scheduling perspective. As I try to put all the needs in lay them out, I think music, both appropriate and quantity of music rehearsal spaces, practice spaces, storage spaces has certainly come up quite a bit. Hands-on lab spaces, so spaces like FACS and science being really designed for a different era that doesn't match programming that's happening today. And then some interesting big picture ones that I'm excited to see how the task force wrestles with, like wayfinding and just general circulation patterns within the building. So some things that are maybe not quite as isolated to a department, but more of a general, how long it takes people to get to know the building and what could be done about that. And I'm sure I'm missing something, but those are probably, if I had to pick top 5 themes of what we've heard so far.
And Sal, I'm not sure if you said comfort.
Oh, sure. Yes.
I think that I think one of the most significant complaints that we get is about the lack of consistent comfort across the building. We have 3 or 4 different plants there, some of which have single pane windows, some of which don't. So as we have a number of high school students here for their global studies class tonight, you'll see all these people with jackets and sweatshirts and things to be able to modulate what they need to be comfortable in a classroom based upon where they are at.
Amy.
Hi, Sal. Thanks for being here. It's always good working with you. I see we have all the high school students and we have other members of our audience, and there might be people watching on the live stream. And I'm sure when the topic of high school comes up, everyone has ideas. So
Sure.
if there are people who haven't been involved in the listening sessions or, aren't on the task force, but they really think you need to know about whatever it is, how do they tell you? Do they write emails to Dr. Hillman? Is there any process for collecting information from people who just have to put their 2 cents into the puzzle?
That's a great question. I would guess we might get a little bit of that after this being a public meeting tonight. We have one of our oversight committee meetings, I think tomorrow afternoon, right? I think that'd be a great thing to add to the agenda to talk about how we want to process those and give any advice. I would guess that, emailing Dr. Hillman is a perfectly fine option, but if there's maybe something more formal we might want to do.
Thank you.
Good question.
Yeah, Jeff Quinnell here. Thanks for your work. Number one, I went to that school and it's 3 years there, a long time ago, graduated from Northfield. In your mind, your architecture mind, when you look at that, how many sections of that school do you see? If you just, because I mean, I
How
know.
many pieces do I break it up into?
You start off the blue. I mean, just,
I have to think about that.
is it 5? Is it 7? Is it 3? I mean, we've got wings. I mean, it's all about,
I think about 5 in
that's
my
what I
head.
was going to say. That's funny. You come up with the same number.
And mostly because that's how the mechanical
Yeah.
plant is broken out.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
So if you're looking at the possibility of merging what you hear about sports and sports facilities along with the plan of updating that to make it current, what are you hearing about sports facilities or things that the needs from students and other people so far? Now, granted, we haven't done that task force for the high school, and I'm actually going to be on that, but I just was wondering your initial part, and really it would be nice if you don't want to necessarily go too far when it's 20 below to get to your ice arena or your whatever it would end up being, if we can afford and figure out the space for that on that campus. What has been some kind of initial thoughts of what maybe we do well at and what maybe we don't? But I mean, it's easy to whine when you go to a school that's older to say we need this, but
Sure.
where's that meet the taxpayers' budget?
Sure. If I had to maybe go one level deeper on what I've heard so far, I would say about activities and athletic space. I think there's challenges during the daytime with having appropriate PE space. For example, like the incredibly popular walking class you have, and that having to happen in inappropriate venues. I think scheduling for activities, it's always interesting to put my athletic director hat on and appreciate the chaos of who gets displaced, especially during inclement weather and who's going off site. So I think there's a clear demand for additional space. I think the interesting thing that the task force is going to have to wrestle with is at what point does the community believe you need that space, and at what point does it cross over into want, right? Because it's challenging to imagine having a certain number of basketball courts, for example, and how many would be too many, right? But everything comes at a cost. And then I think the locker rooms have come up as being an opportunity area. Of a space that could be improved for both supervision and comfort, and I would say even just pure space utilization. They're pretty large, but divided up into many little rooms. I'm trying to think what other, we have talked a little bit about outdoor space as well, and the playability of your fields, especially when it comes to spring weather, and what could be done to make your spaces more predictable and put them to work a little bit harder. Dr. Hillman, you were at some of those meetings too. I'm sure I'm missing something.
Yeah, I think when it,
We
I
talked
think,
for 3 hours with that group, so it's,
yes, we did.
I'm paraphrasing a little bit.
Yeah, I would say that when it comes to athletic space, Jeff, I know that you're pay attention to this, but it really is about quantity, number one, quality, number two, and then access to it. And so, we're very fortunate. We have a number of really quality elementary gymnasiums in the district, but as Sal said, that means that we have high school athletics and activities distributed throughout the city. We've got some great partnerships with the city on certain other playing spaces. And we envision that being part of the overall solution to athletics moving forward. But I don't think that, I think the reasonable person can look at our overall high school facility. When we specific talk about athletic facilities, it's pretty clear that we have fallen quite a bit behind others in the Big Nine. And especially as you go to the north, we just don't have the same number of athletic spaces or the same quality. We've got a beautiful main competition gym, right? It's a quaint, very cool gymnasium, but that's the only gym on the high school campus, right? That's just not usual anymore for a high school of our size.
We got to hear a little bit from, like, for example, the youth associations that also utilize your facilities and what your scheduling and the demands does to timelines for especially some of your younger students and participants. So,
Thank you.
thank you. Good question.
Thank you. Tom, do you have a question?
I have a couple more. So what about the condition of the buildings themselves?
The, like, of the systems and finishes and components.
Yeah, windows, bricks, HVAC.
Sure. Gosh, where do I start? It's a big topic. We went for a couple hours, I would say air handler by air handler a couple Mondays ago with Cole and his crew. So, big picture, I would say there are major portions of the building that has come due for replacement. In particular, if you imagine like the gym, the locker rooms, the music area, all has mostly original mid 1960s systems. So that's an area of major improvement needed. You've made significant ventilation upgrades in the wings. So there's been quite a bit done there, but there's additional controllability that is as desired. And then I think envelope is actually a huge contributing factor. So the age and condition of the windows. I think in general, I'm trying to think of finishes challenges. I wouldn't say on the whole finishes. I think your building's been maintained quite well from that perspective, from aesthetics perspective. Did a huge electrical upgrade in, I think it was 2002. So I don't worry too much about the electrical systems of the building. You do have spots of the building that are not dehumidified in any way. So there's parts of the building that have dehumidification and parts that do not. I think a pavement plan is something that's going to have to be studied, and how to maintain the significant amount of parking and what have you at a high school. Trying to think what, it kind of goes along with doors, but you've got quite a few rusted entrances. So as it comes to the doors in and out of the building, of which there are many, as a one-story high school, there's a lot of condition work to be done there. If I had to say big picture, I think envelope and mechanical systems, especially of the southern half of the building, are probably the top ticket items.
Okay,
I think one interesting thing will be the fix, as many of the air handling rooms at the existing building will not fit a new air handler that has the required heat and energy recovery ventilation. So we'll have to come up with a creative solution for where to put new units.
okay. And you notice the new Greenvale school doesn't look like any of the other elementary schools in town, or certainly that I grew up with. Is there a new thinking of how a school should look? Should they be a flat rooms down these narrow halls, low ceilings, or are they more open, bright, inviting, more open to nature and whatnot? And will we be able to do that within our existing structures?
I'm sure you can do it within your existing structure. What's interesting is we asked people favorite parts about the building. The access to natural light and views are one of the things that come up. I think there's negative parts of some of your layout, right? That it leads to long hallways, and maybe you have to kind of go through one part of the building to get to another. But people do appreciate the many views to your beautiful site that you have at the high school. And I think the natural breaks that the courtyards do provide. I think it'll be an interesting challenge as we talk about the building, as how do you recreate that? Because That, the media center and the flexible spaces, I think are the top things I heard about of what people love about the building. And I guess your other part of your question is, does education look different? And I think things are changing in regards to flexibility. At the department head meeting 2 weeks ago, that somebody summarized it nicely, that you're trying to operate a very flexible day and very flexible program offerings out of an inflexible building, and that it does hold you back in some ways.
And then the last question is, we're looking at this over 20 years. So if we're investing millions of dollars, but for 20 years, that seems short-sighted.
And I can clarify, I think in the purpose statement, the intent would be, because you can't project enrollment past 20 years, difficult to project enrollment out 10 years, right? Because kindergartners haven't been born yet, but, so I think it's to accommodate programs for the next 20 years. And then I think thinking about condition for the next 20 years of systems that will come due for replacement in that timeline, but something that's not going to come due for replacement in 20 years, we probably, you need to plan for that in the future, but you might not replace something because it's going to come due in 20 years. So, but I'd take any board feedback, and if that's not the right thing to say in a purpose statement, we could clarify that for the task force. So we're looking for a long-term solution, but we might not go replace an air handler that's still got 20 years left, like life left in it, just because it's, right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Corey?
Hi, Sal. Thanks for being here and thanks for the rundown.
Yeah.
I believe the building was built in the mid-60s. Is that correct?
Yes, I think the dedication plaque says 1965.
So obviously we think we can maintain this for the future. I'm kind of curious, of buildings from that age, what are their typical life expectancies?
I would say structure is almost unlimited expectancy, right? So when it comes to the buildings, footings, foundations, columns, beams, et cetera, it's difficult to put it. I would say many people would say 100 years. When it comes to major mechanical systems, they can vary from 15 years if it's a piece of equipment that's outside on a roof and being exposed to the elements regularly. Boiler plants, I think, I don't know, what would you say for a boiler plant? 35 years, 35 years. Obviously, steam boilers have lasted a lot longer than that. There's steam boilers from the 20s that are still working, but so I think when you talk about building life expectancy, certain components have a shorter or longer life, but when it comes to the bones of the building, I don't see that as being the challenge. You don't have major settlement issues or corrosion or anything of that nature.
Good question. Anybody else? Question, comments?
Question.
Hey, Jeff.
For clarification, yeah, 1964, 65 was built, but that's the first part of it. And then, of course, there's the other wings.
There's been other additions
Yeah,
over
I mean,
time.
in
Yes.
different years. So, I mean, you're looking at, there's different additions on there, but 65 was when that originally started. So.
Correct.
Good. Julie?
Good point of clarification.
Thanks, Sal. What I enjoyed hearing about was the listening sessions and just the extraordinarily masterful job you do at not listening, but then people not really totally sure what they're saying, or they articulate, and then you're just able to really have that put into the final plan. You really take in all of that and are able to really use that to come up with an amazing plan. And we saw that with your work on the elementary school. So thank you for your ability
Thank
to
you.
monitor and to really facilitate those learning sessions. I think we feel really good that people are being heard, because it's always reflected in the final plan. So within the task force and then within the listening sessions, you and I just had a chance to connect briefly before the meeting, but is there budget parameters that have been placed in terms of overall project scope?
Good question. I don't think any formal parameters have been set. The Finance Advisory Committee of the board did review a couple potential scenarios put together by Ellers. Was that 2 weeks ago? 3 weeks ago. Yeah. And what the impact would be on the average value home. And there was a discussion had at that meeting about at what point is investment into an existing building of any kind not financially advisable in the mind of the public versus replacement. And I don't know that group landed on an exact figure, but there is there's a moment in which you stop putting money into the car you have and when you start saving for for your new car. So that group didn't give to my knowledge, any sort of formal recommendation. But I would say when we started talking about the figure of 80 million, it was difficult for that group to justify that without further context. We did talk about the potential cost of a new building. being well over $100 million. And obviously that would need further study in regards to size and site and what have you. But if it was, 80 out of 110, have we crossed that threshold in people's mind of, financially responsible or not? But I don't think that there were any formal parameters set, and I would, Dr. Hillman, if you'd expand on that at all, but
Typically at this point in the process, we don't identify a target. We are, of course, as Sal said, looking at what is the tolerance, right, in terms of the split between what we're able to do now for the return on that investment versus a potential new facility. And we have to understand where we're at with inflation and with the economy as well. That's something that we have to take into account. So typically at this part of the process, we don't provide the task force with that parameter because that's the next phase of as we operationalize what that recommendation might be. I also want to just take a moment to just really thank Val Murderstorff and Cole Nelson. They have really been the district's key people working with Sal and with Josh through this part, attending most, if not all, of the listening sessions. And so, of course, that we're in great hands with Cole and Val on that. And then just also, we've talked about this task force a number of times. I just think it's important to share. So we have done invitations out to 31 different people from within the community, doing everything that we reasonably can to try to get different stakeholders to the table. So it includes community members, it includes parents in the community members without children. It includes people from a number of our advisory committees, teachers, support staff, students. And so we are working to have a good cross section of people to come together to have this discussion. So we sent out 31 community or staff invitations with another, I think, 7 or 8 administrators being part of this as well. And they don't get the choice, right? They have to be there. But so thanks to Val and to Cole for their leadership. And then, of course, Dr. Lear has been doing a lot of the coordination of the meetings at the building level as well. So we thank all of them for their work to this point.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Julie?
I just had one comment. I appreciate Dr. Hillman laying out really the expectations that we would potentially go to our community. And what I hope our community would hear is that we remain committed to financial stewardship, but that, we did learn a lot when we were asking the community in 2017. And I think, Dr. Hillman, you point well to, we have a community that really appreciates preserving things and the history of the building. And we know the location of the building is something that our community really appreciates. But hopefully they hear as well that we still remain committed to the educational adequacy of that building. And I think you talk about that in terms of, building capacity versus really being able to ensure that programs are meeting the expectation of the students and are able to really deliver the curriculum in today's learning environment. So I hope that's what our community hears, is that we're continuing to really remain very committed to financial stewardship, but the needs of and ensuring the educational success of our students and and the needs that they have, both co-curricular and fine arts and science and all the things that we are so proud of to be able to deliver, but that we're delivering them the way that we need to. So I just really appreciated too the guidelines and the thinking around the guiding principles of the task force work. I think that will really guide them well, and I'm really looking forward to the results that they are undoubtedly going to come up with. And Sal, you will work your magic, and we know if we are in a fortunate situation to turn it over to Knutson Construction, they will work their magic as well. And we just are always so grateful, or continue to be incredibly grateful for the work you did in our elementary buildings and finish on time and on budget in the middle of a pandemic was extraordinary. So we are, as Amy said, so grateful to be continuing to work with you.
I'm going to say thanks on behalf of the whole team. And Josh, you got to tell the rest of the team too. Thanks. Our wheels are already
Thank you,
spinning
Julie.
on what to do. So
Thank you. Corey, did you have a question?
Yeah, I have a quick question. So a few hypothetical numbers were shared for repair or replacement. I'm curious what the current assessed value of the high school is, just so we have context. Putting you on the spot.
I don't have that number with me. Or Cole, do you have that number?
It's 80 and 110 million. doesn't mean anything without, current value.
I think there might be a difference between what it gets assessed at and what the cost to replace it might be at. But we'd be happy to prepare that.
Question. Okay, are there any other questions or comments? Okay, Tom?
One quick question. If it were to pass this year, are there concerns about supplies and labor and the things that everybody's running into?
Uh-oh, Josh, you might have a question. Get up here. I would say yes, but with careful planning, I think we could build you a schedule that would accommodate all of that. So that could look like, procuring certain packages at the right moment to allow for ordering. Josh, what else would you want to say about lead times and procurement? Yeah.
Would you like to come up to the
To the
microphone?
podium and say that so that it can be on the recording.
I thought
He
Sal
thought he
was
was
gonna
escaped.
take this, but, currently, yes, we're obviously seeing a lot of lead time issues, and obviously, workforce is always a concern down the road, but, this, project will be a challenging one, but it's nothing that we haven't experienced in other districts like Rochester, and, Kingsland and whatnot. So, we're up for the challenge, and I think that with good planning and working alongside with Gold and their team, finding products that are readily available or easy to get or procure, I wouldn't be concerned about how to execute on our side.
If there were remodeling, and if that was the route, and you were remodeling and you had schedules that, it has to be ready before the school year, I can see that being problematic if there were last minute glitches, but as opposed to building new where that's happening while classes are going on, you don't have trailers and whatnot, either.
Absolutely. A lot of the, indoor air quality projects that we do, they're over multiple summers, multiple years. But again, I think, as Wold is putting together the documents for us to execute on, we're working hand in hand to make sure that, what we can get done in that fine amount of time, we can get done, and with the materials and power man, workforce that we have. So, obviously they're challenging projects, but they're nothing that we haven't over.
Things we normally would have ordered in April, we're now ordering in November. Right?
Yeah,
Like
easily.
roofing material, anything with a condensing unit involved, steel, precast concrete, insulation in general, I would say. So it's really just about procuring it in time. And what we've been, or Knutson has been encouraging contractors to just order things and get them on site as soon as possible. It's much easier to find somewhere to store something than to be without it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more comments? Questions? I have a couple for you. This may not be fair to ask you, but I'm going to ask about the comments. Would you say there was more positive comments, meeting more of the participants that you asked about the building, talking about places in the high school that they do like? You talked about some of those open spaces. Were there more comments, people having favorite places at the high school, or where there seemed to be more comments with problem areas of the building? Hard to say.
Well, I think there were really strong themes around the favorite parts. And so those, 5 or 6 parts of the building came up over and over and over. I think as you think about the many departments or many staff that are working in the building, they all each have their own things that they'd love to see change about their department or even maybe their specific room. So I would say that there's a pretty long list of things that need to be done, or that in many people's minds need to be done. And it'll just be interesting to see how the task force prioritizes that. We intend to share all of that feedback with them and see what they might do with it. I would say with the student group, they're here with me tonight. I think it was pretty balanced from the students actually, but the challenges list from staff, I think, was longer.
Okay. And I don't know if it's too soon to ask, are there some items that need attention right away? I don't know if you're able to answer that yet.
And attention right away. So if you look, I would say from a pure systems life cycle perspective, yes. there are things that need attention right away. I think the buildings and grounds crew is doing everything they can to maintain those systems. And I think with good maintenance, obviously, we all know that a car that's projected to last X number of years, you can keep going for longer. So I don't see any critical failures, at least then, I don't know if Cole would say anything else, but you know, you are on borrowed time on some systems from the mid-60s in that regard. So we'll just keep hoping that they keep going with good maintenance until you have a solution in place.
Right. Okay, thank you. Just two more questions.
Yes.
So we heard that the building is from 1965 and there's been additions. Do you know the dates of those additions? In other words, what is the date of the most recent update to the building?
Most recent major update I would say would be the ventilation upgrades, I think, in the 2002, 2003 timeframe. I think the last addition, would that be the auditorium edition? I think that would be the auditorium edition in the mid 90s. I don't remember if the drawings are 1994.
The 94, 90, right, Cole? Okay, 90,
I
yep.
think it opened. Okay. Yep. So I think that was the last time the building was expanded.
Okay.
And then I think the last major systems improvement would have been 2002 to 2003. And that would have been the wings, ventilation, and the S, M, and D wing and part of the V wing.
Okay.
I guess I don't know when the media center remodel was done. So that one I should
I
speak.
think that was it's before I was here, but I think that it was part of that last piece with.
That same time
yep.
frame. Okay. So I would say that would be your last major investment point. Mid 90s was last expansion.
Okay. And then finally, I wanted to hear your answer again to Tom's question about would the structure of the building provide for making big open areas and more windows or more connection to the to nature, more lighting?
Yeah, I don't think anything about the structure of the building will hold you back in that regard. I think, you know, probably one of the larger challenges with the building is that it is a one-story high school, which
Okay.
is somewhat unique. So it's got a big footprint. So how the task force wrestles with that, but like structurally, I don't think there'd be any challenge with making more flexible areas or anything like that.
Yeah.
I think the vast majority of rooms in the school do have exterior light, natural light. There are a handful of, there's not too many rooms that are on the interior that are windowless. There are some, but the trade-off is you have to walk a long, long way because of the fact that it is one story. So the good news of having all of that exterior wall is that you get that natural light. There are some, but it's not we've had other schools where there was far less natural light
Yeah.
in parts of the building than the high school. To be fair, some of the natural light comes from very antiquated window systems where they're very thin windows. So it's not what we see at this building with the renovation or at Greenvale Park with that. Val looks like she's going to weigh in.
I was just gonna weigh in on the square footage and the additions. So I pulled up what we have formally reported to MDE. 1964 was 179,000 square feet. So that was obviously the initial build. We added on in 1970 for 6,030 square feet, and then in 93 for about 21,000. 1997 was another 30,000. 1998 was another 25,000. And in 2002, we added 9,900 square feet. There you go.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Okay, thanks so much, Sal.
Yes, thank you for having me. Good evening.
Right. Good. Okay, we have Laura Seltzer, Director of Arcadia Charter School, and Dr. Hillman presenting on the Arcadia Charter School contract. Welcome, Laura.
Front that Laura is here tonight to talk about the kickoff to the Arcadia contract renewal. As you know, we're one of only two public school districts and traditional public school districts in the state that go through the rigorous process of becoming a charter school authorizer. And so we're very proud to have two public charter schools that we authorize, Arcadia being one of them. They're at the end of their 5-year contract. So we're working on the preparations for a new 5-year contract. And Laura is going to start that process tonight by laying out where they're looking at heading between now and the end of May when we ask you to renew the contract with Arcadia.
Thank you, Dr. Hillman.
So I have two questions that I'd like you to consider during the presentation, and then I'll bring them back at the end. And one is there any additional data that you would like me to gather? And the second is, does the timeline seem reasonable? So those are the two things I want you to keep in mind. And when you're thinking about data, the four questions, there are four critical questions that Northfield Public Schools as our authorizer asks us to answer in our application process. And these are those questions which are somehow all one right now. So is the educational program a success? Is the organization effective and well run? Is the school meeting its legal obligations and our strategies in place for sustaining success and continuing to improve over the next charter term? So I'm going to go through those four, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the evidence that I'll be putting together in our application. And so that's where I want you to think about, is there additional evidence, additional data you'd like me to gather? And then at the end of this, I'll show you the timeline. So in terms of the educational program being a success, we'll of course look at our MCA scores. This is our current district level, and this is comparing Arcadia, Northfield, the state, and MNCS. So if you look at Arcadia, it came out of the EdVisions model. MNCS was the original EdVisions school. It was all project-based all the time. We've innovated our program to be a hybrid of both PBL and also more traditional classes in terms of like the daily structure, although we are working to also have our classes be project-based. So in terms of math proficiency, we were hovering around the state proficiency level until the pandemic hit. And I mentioned in January when I was here that that number, actually 11 of those of the students who took it were sixth graders, 3 of whom were proficient, who were probably most deeply impacted by the pandemic. And our high school student, we only had 1 who took it. So, and they were proficient. So if you look at our MAP test scores, which I'm going to, I didn't bring that tonight, but I'm going to include that in the application. That shows that actually at the high school level, we have quite a few students who are very proficient at math. And so while this doesn't look fantastic, if you look at overall how students do in math from 6th through 12th grade, by the time they're graduating, they do tend to be proficient in math. I'm including, like I said, that MNCS data, just so you can see sort of compared to the original model, how what we've done has, I hope, improved the outcomes for our students.
MNCS stands for the Minnesota New Country School in Henderson, Minnesota. It was, I believe it was the first charter school in the state. And of course, Minnesota had the first charter school law in the nation.
1993. Reading proficiency. So this, we always have excellent reading scores. Project-based learning really lends itself to strong reading. So, you know, I put on here reading is our superpower. That is really something that we excel at. The same 11 students, as I mentioned, who didn't do so hot in math, were over 90% proficient in reading, although this is the whole district. So this includes people other than that group. But and then I did add on the bottom here, our world's best workforce goals. I know that one of the 4 pieces that you would like to see for charter schools in your portfolio is that we're meeting the majority of our world's best workforce goals. All of our goals were met in 2019, 2020, and all that had available data were met in 2020, 2021. Is the organization effective and well run? So I started, when I started a couple years ago, the enrollment was at 108. We are now at 127, which is 100% capacity. 7 of our students are taking PSEO classes. 1 of them is full-time PSEO. Our overall enrollment goal is 126. That does not include PSEO students. So full-time PSEO students. So we're on target there. Financial performance, we have won the finance award for charter schools every year of the current contract. And our fund balance, when I started, it was at 270.42, and we are now at 543.84, which is significantly greater than our $400,000 goal. And I know that's another of the goals that you have for charter schools in the portfolio. Is the school meeting its legal obligations? We work with Bergen KDV, that's our business managers. They help us stay in, make sure all of our financial reporting is in order. We also, of course, have an annual audit, and we've had no findings in those audits for the last few years. Services to children with special needs we've kind of fluctuated a lot with our population of students requiring special education services. Back in 2003, when the school opened, we were at 21%. That rose to 45% in 2017. And at the beginning of this year, we were at 30.7%. That has gone up a bit. We've had a few more students who actually moved into Arcadia mid-year that has raised that percentage somewhat, but this is based on the NBE report card data. So that would have been based on our October 1st information. And we did meet our maintenance of effort numbers despite lower spending overall on special education. I did include, we do have EL students. We only have 4. That's my background. So I'm actually the EL teacher, which is really exciting. And in a project-based school, there are a lot of wonderful ways to differentiate instruction. And then free and reduced population, we're at 20.5%, which is actually higher than it was previously. We went from having maybe 10 to 15 families to 20 to 30 families. And then, of course, state and federal reporting, we do every year. That has shifted to Kim Hansen, who is our office manager. And so we have submitted all of those reports. This is my last year of doing STAR reporting by myself. Very exciting. CDRC data is in. We actually did complete the NCCC data, which we had never done before. And so we made sure we got it in this year. Most project-based schools don't do it because it's very complicated. If you're trying to make it fit with a school, you're trying to put it just doesn't fit very well. So MNCS, when we talked to them, and Avalon both said, yeah, we just don't do it. So we've made sure that all of those are in. Our strategies in place for sustaining success and continuing to improve over the next charter term. We're really working right now to refocus on progressive project-based learning. So back in August, we had the Buck Institute, now called PBL Works, come out and do their PBL 101 professional development with all of Arcadia's licensed staff. And then QComp used work that they did in that PBL 1 professional development throughout this year. So as teachers developed their professional goals and their student learning goals, it was all based on using project-based learning as a strategy. One of the things that I started last year, this question of, are we really achieving our mission and striving toward our vision, was coming up quite a bit. And we didn't really have a good way to measure that. And so since we are a project-based school and we love a good rubric, we are creating an Arcadia rubric that is designed to measure that. And so that's been a really neat process. We started out with our district advisory committee, really looking into what are the things that our vision, our mission and vision say we are going to do, and then what would indicators be that would demonstrate we're doing that. And so we've been finishing that process up. Strategic planning is coming out of that, actually. So based on our mission and vision, what are our primary goals for the next 5 years? That's happening actually right now. The board started that at their retreat at the beginning of this month. And then the strategies that we will use to achieve those goals. The goal is that we can actually look at the Arcadia rubric and pull strategies that allow us to move some of those indicators forward. The Arcadia School Board and board committees continue to be a wonderful group and supportive group for the school. We have education, finance, facilities, and marketing committees right now. The education committee is really working actively on that Arcadia rubric. And then of course, finance works with Bergen KDV and works to make sure that our financial oversight is going well. Facilities is a new committee. So we had the addition to the school in over the term of the last contract. So in 2019, that was completed in November of 2019. And so now we just have more building to take care of. And especially with COVID, there have been a lot of questions that it's been nice to have a committee to help me answer about the building. And it's looking much better. And then marketing is the last committee. And we've been working on
using social media. Prior to my arrival, there were some Facebook posts occasionally. We're working on being a little more strategic about that. Of course, our marketing committee is run by a college student who is majoring in graphic design and marketing. And so there's, it's an area that we need to do some work on, but it's also improving quite a bit. And I'm enjoying seeing what she's coming up with. It's been really cool. And then of course we have you to help us as well to make sure that we are staying on track as a school. So our timeline, the next Arcadia board meeting is March 15th, and we'll be reviewing the Arcadia rubric. And then we're going to go into a little more trying to bring people in and then doing probably some survey work to gather more information from the community before they complete their next strategic plan for the next 5 years. The nice thing is we're trying to align the contract with the authorizer, our world's best workforce goals, and the strategic plan, all of those pieces together. So that's kind of an exciting thing that's scheduled to happen here. We'll have you all coming out to visit us on March 31st with a site visit, and we'll use feedback from that as well in our application. We'll complete our self-study by April 15th. The goal is that by the April 19th board meeting, the Arcadia board could look at the draft of the application for the new contract, and then they'll also be finalizing the strategic plan and 2022 to 2027 World's Best Workforce Goals. I would then, prior to April 25th, which would be your next board meeting, submit the application to the board and Dr. Hillman. And then I had noted here that I could possibly be present at the April 25th board meeting, or I could come in May. Whenever you'd like to have me come answer questions, I'm always happy to come talk. And then if assuming that you approve it, that would be in May, and then the Arcadia board would approve it at their May 17th meeting, and then it just needs to be submitted to MDE within 10 days after both boards signing on the contract. So that is the timeline, which brings me back to my original questions. Is there additional data you'd like me to gather, and does the timeline seem reasonable?
Thank you, Laura. Excellent, excellent report. Are there any questions or comments? Hey, Corey.
Hi, Laura. Thanks for the report. I do have a couple questions. For those listening at home, can you describe what services fall under special needs? Because I think there's a misconception about what that actually applies to. And with the size of your school, what challenges does that offer you as a leader? Because I think what's your enrollment, 127, so 30%, that's roughly 38 students. That's a significant number. And if they have different needs, how do you adjust to meet those in that setting?
Sure. So a lot of our students, we tend to have students with anxiety or with learning difference, like dyslexia or a specific learning disability in like math, for example. And so for that, a lot of it we're able to do through push-in services where a special education teacher works with a general education teacher to support a student. For students who need additional support, we do have, we actually fully staffed, we would have 5 special education teachers right now. We are at 3 and they are doing all right. But we have some recruiting to do in that area, but we are still serving students minutes that are on an IEP. So an IEP is a legal document that gives students access to, the goal is to make sure that all students have access to our curriculum and our learning. And so we have, we do have some pull-out classes. The beauty of project-based learning is that it's just really powerful for differentiation. You can do a lot for students who need something different. And so if you have a student who struggles with reading, we have audiobooks, we have, we use a lot of technology to try and help meet those needs. Same with like writing, they could use software that helps document what they're saying, things like that. So I'm not sure if that Okay.
Thank you. Another question or comment?
I-
Tom, you had a,
So I guess I have no clue on this. Is your special ed covered by state or federal funding at all? Okay, and so potentially if the state finds extra money, you would benefit from that too, right? And you could potentially hire additional staff.
Oh, we could hire additional, special education funding is on a reimbursement basis. So you just say like, this is what we need to make sure that students are able to learn in this setting. And this is, so we're gonna have, like, if somebody needed a paraprofessional to support them with their writing. If we deem that that's necessary and that's in the IEP, then on a reimbursement basis, we would get funding for that. So it's actually not about funding, it's really about the teacher shortage. It's just finding qualified people. That's the challenge.
question. Any more comments?
I just want to assure the board, we recently went through this process with Prairie Creek Community School. We've done this process before. We look forward to continuing our relationship with Arcadia. We're excited about our annual visit because those have been disrupted a little bit, obviously, over the last couple of years. And so I think that the timeline is reasonable, especially since we agreed on it before you came tonight. So I think the timeline is reasonable. It will be, once you get this process going, it does move along at a clip. And what I really am pleased with what Arcadia is doing, which is different than what they've had the opportunity in the past. My affection for strategic planning and the fact that their strategic plan is being updated and adopted just before they make their goal proposals for their contract. It's an ideal time. So we look forward to the process and we will most likely keep to the timeline.
Julie, did you have a comment or question?
No, I just wanted to thank you for your presentation and for really outlining what it will entail for the authorization and really, to point out the fund balance that is huge and that you've been able to grow your fund balance, huge credit to you for that. And then just really your passion for project-based learning and your understanding of it. And certainly the special education teacher shortage is something we certainly understand. And so just wanted to thank you for that and that, we do recognize and value the choice that Arcadia gives to our Northfield area students. So thank you. And we do look forward to the process continuing. So thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I just had one quick question. Oh, Corey, go ahead.
Sorry, quick question following up on Julie. And concerning the funding, great job, obviously increasing. I did notice on the website, there's a donation option. How often is that used? And is that something you can talk about in terms of
Sure.
how much support you're getting from community members?
So we had somebody make a large donation, which is not super common for a public school. And fundraising has not really been something we've done much in the past. So our fundraising goal was $10,000 and this person donated 15 in memory of a loved one. And so we've talked a lot about making sure that that's used toward experiential learning. That was what they cared about. And so, so I would say that's something we've talked about doing more of. I know that in terms of our staff, we are a small staff, 16 licensed people, and 4 of those people are part-time and 5 of them being special education. That's small, right? So 7 central advisors and 8 would actually be ideal. One of the ways that we're actually looking at making that work, because we don't have a ton of funding, is to have the 8th advisor actually be a co-teacher, a special education co-teacher, and really emphasize that push in, especially around executive functioning skills and any sort of reading and writing, because it would really ideally serve our students. But yeah, I would say we have not done a lot of fundraising. So that's something we're going to work on probably in the next few years, trying to build that, because it would allow us to do more. Really, ideally, what we'd like to do is hire an arts coordinator and really, so the school started out as art tech and it was all about arts and technology. We dropped technology because if you remember the early 2000s, keeping up with it was nearly impossible. But the arts piece has always been really central to Arcadia's identity. And so So looking at how do we get somebody in who can, right now we have 2 part-time art people. We have Bob doing theater, who's amazing, and we have a part-time art teacher. And so to create at least 1 full-time art position is a dream, but that would mean fundraising about $60,000.
Okay, thank you. Any more comments, questions? Laura, great report. I have one request for next time, maybe under organization. Is it effective and well run? Something about parent and student satisfaction and how you measure that. Great job. Okay. Thank you so much. All right, thank you. Okay, our next report is an update on the budget prioritization process. Presenting will be Director of Finance, Val Murdisdorf, and Dr. Hillman. Welcome, Val.
Val is going to join me for this.
Thank you. You want to kick it off?
I'll kick it off.
Good.
So as you know, we have spoken with you about the need to do budget adjustments. Let's go back to the reasoning. We want to share the reasoning as many times as we can. We have a couple of pressures that we're working through. Number one, we're seeing declining enrollment in the school district. Hazel Reinhardt, who presented from our podium a couple of months ago, or about a month ago, talked about losing 400 students or declining by about 400 students over the period of 10 years. We know that will be heavier in the secondary to begin with some elementary student class sizes or class grades remaining fairly similar. But regardless, 400 students over 10 years, we can do the mathematics. That's a lot of money. The second part is continued, what I call chronic underfunding from the state. When I presented to the Budget Prioritization Committee last Thursday, we showed the good old fashioned Schools for Equity graph that shows what the basic formula would buy today if it had just kept up with inflation. And we're talking around a $1,500 or so difference there between what the buying power, $1,600 to $1,605 to be exact. We have $1,605 less dollars of buying power now compared to what the formula would have provided in 1991, 92. We also know that we have a number of other financial pressures, including just, for example, the reduction in Title I and in compensatory aid due to people not completing the free and reduced lunch forms. You know, we've done all sorts of effort to make that happen. So that's the background of why we're looking at about a $4.5 million budget adjustment over the next couple of years. So we kicked off our budget prioritization committees on last Thursday night. We have approximately 60 or so people who are going to participate in 3 different teams. We have a team focused on the elementary budget, the middle school, high school, and area learning center budgets, and then the district services budget. At that meeting, both Director Murdisdorf and I gave presentations. I talked about the strategic plan. I talked about some of the pressures that we are under, just as I've shared with you. We shared our strategic commitments, our benchmarks, and then we talked about the important distinction between prioritization versus cuts. We're intentionally understanding that this process might be a little messier. If we wanted to cut the budget, we could right now cut the budget by what we need in about an hour, right? We'd bring you some spreadsheets and we'd get a red pen and we could cut the budget, right? But nobody would like that process, right? Because it would not be collaborative. It would not give the community what they needed to share about their perspective. So prioritization is about what we want as opposed to what we think we can do without initially. And that conversation, it's just a nuance, but it is very different in how you look at things. And we already saw in the first meeting, people talking about, well, what if we spent more money in this area because that would make something more efficient and maybe we wouldn't need this other area then. And so that trying to get that creative problem solving going, that budget prioritization is not just about doing without. It's about what are the right places where you want to spend your money so that you are able to achieve your goals. So we talked through those pieces. We gave some structure and ground rules as to how people would participate. Then Val gave a great presentation about just the mechanics of how we are planning to go about it. For those of you who love spreadsheets, Val has created one of the best spreadsheets of all time in how the teams have an office employee running the spreadsheet. So when people say, we'd like to see what this would cost, the office employee is able to plug that right from the backup information into the prioritization tab, and we're able to know immediately. So we've got really great data, very detailed as you want versus as big picture as you want. So Val did a great job of laying out that process. And then we broke into groups, started that process of just talking through what programming in each of those 3 budget teams look like, and then started to ideate about what are some of the areas that we would want to look at first for prioritization. Our second meeting is tomorrow night. We anticipate getting more deep into that discussion. Then we're going to take a break for spring break, come back with 2 more meetings in March. Again, with the goal of prioritizing around $4.5 million less worth of expenditures than we had this year. A couple of key pieces is that we are moving into this with a position of financial strength. We are able to be proactive with this because of the great stewardship that the district has had over the years and the fact that we have a substantial fund balance to be able to help this process and be able to phase some things in. And then, as you know, we've been very good stewards of the federal reserve funds, the federal COVID-19 relief funds that we've got. We have around $2 million, just under $2 million of federal relief funds that we have identified for budget stabilization. So that doesn't fix the issue long term, right? But it does allow us to be more thoughtful about how we might phase the new expenditure targets in to align with that decline in students. And so I'm going to have value in your packet. You had the 4-meeting outline. You also had the list of people who have agreed to be part of ththose teams. Not everybody can be there at every meeting. And so there are some people on that list who were not there at the first meeting. We have some other people who now we had invited who now are able to join in the second meeting. So we'll update that roster as we finalize who is at the meetings. But that is where we're at. We don't want to sugarcoat it. We have to have $4.5 million less worth of expenditures to phase in over the next couple of years. That is not easy. It will involve people. There is no way that you can make these kinds of adjustments and not impact the people of the school district. So we really want to make sure that people in the community are paying attention. We did several all calls to ask people to participate in these teams. We're making sure we're communicating to people through our district updates to families, and we're using KYMN radio and our other news sources as a way to get the information out. Because at the end of the day, that committee is going to make some recommendations. We've been very clear with them that it's what we call a level 2 decision. So the level 2 decision is this: they have a chance to create recommendations and this very detailed input, of which then the school district's administration team will operationalize what would that look like, and then bring that to you as the board for the final determination. And so there might be some other opportunities for us to engage the public with this as we move forward. This is where we're at today. And I have Val share her perspective on how the first meeting went and upcoming meetings, and then we'd be happy to stand for your questions.
Sure. I think the only thing I would add to Dr. Hillman's comments is there's a budget target that will effectively end up reducing $4.5 million, but we are asking them to prioritize all of the expenditures. So if we do have more open enrollment that wasn't anticipated, or the state or the federal government give us more money that we hadn't anticipated, then we have a structure for what the groups would want us to add back first and in what order. So that is something in addition that we're asking the groups to commit to. I think overall, it's a lot to absorb. So the first meeting was just lots of questions and dialogue. All of the administrators in each group kind of gave an overview for the committee about what kind of programming, what does it actually look like in the building. And then they had probably 20 minutes at the end to kind of just start looking at the numbers and diving in. So not a lot of time to really dig into the numbers. It was a lot of just orientation. So we're expecting some really good questions and dialogue at this next meeting as we get a little deeper into it.
I think just a couple of other things that I would add is that we are trying to help people understand the realities of what's expected of us versus what funding we get. So we have talked about the special education cross subsidy. Of course, what we know are morally imperative services for students with disabilities that was promised to be reimbursed at a much higher rate than what it has been. We know in our district, we have around a $5 million cross subsidy that's general fund dollars that we use to pay for, again, morally imperative, but required special education services. If you look at the state legislature would just simply fully fund the special education cross subsidy, these reductions would not be needed at this point. So we still will need to prioritize. We think a budget prioritization process is good. We want to make sure that the expenditures that we make align with the strategic plan and are seeking to help us get the results that you have asked us to get and the community has asked us to get. But we also heard today that in a few months ago, we thought when we heard that the state legislature was going to have a 7.7 billion with a B dollar surplus, that we're like, oh my goodness, that's just, that's a lot of money. Well, if you pay attention today, they revised that estimate to be $9.25 billion. So if we are not the only school district in this circumstance with 9.25 billion with a B dollars. If the legislature cannot take significant structural aim at the special education cross subsidy, which dramatically and negatively impacts nearly every one of the 332 school districts in the state, I don't know when we're going to do it. So if you were to ask me, what's the one thing that we could do? It would be to get the legislature to fully fund the special education cross subsidy. That is the thing that can be done that could help most school districts and most importantly us right now. So as I talk to my legislators, a lot of things we're going to talk to them about. The special education cross subsidy. If we can't even take an attempt at this now, I don't know, we will never be able to take an attempt at it. So that's my message to the community. If you want to talk with your legislators about what can they do to help us, fully fund the special education cross subsidy. It will put every school district in a dramatically better position. Was that clear? Okay, special. Yeah.
Thank you. Excellent. Okay, Amy, question, comment?
So this question might be a little premature, but whenever there's personnel involved, that's a big deal. And I'm wondering if you have any sense of what percentage of personnel might be lost through attrition as opposed to actively asking them to leave.
So let's just be really clear in terms of we have a number of collectively bargained contracts that would govern how any reduction in force would happen. So there are very specific rules if that is how the budget team is prioritized, that there are positions that would be lost. Those union contracts and also the union contracts would govern how those employees in those bargaining units are laid off. Okay, number one. We do have several bargaining groups where they are not a collectively bargained contract. And so there's more flexibility in how that process is done. But we've always worked with those units in a very favorable and professional way, very similarly to how we work with our collectively bargained agreements. So in this area, it is very different. We do not have an estimate right now of how many people would be lost through attrition. We do know that we have more people who have already submitted their paperwork for retirement at this point in the year than we did last year. And so last year, this time, I think we had one person who had already told us retire. This year, I think we're at 4, around that. 4 or 5 people who have indicated that they're going to retire at the end of the year. And we also know that there will be other staff members who choose to leave at the end of the year. Public services, I've shared with you, has been incredibly difficult, and that's an understatement. And I think that many people, not just here in Northfield, but across the country, are at their capacity, right, in terms of how much more they can give to the public. So I do anticipate, despite a number of things, for example, this board authorizing $1 million to help support what would have been a very difficult increase to health insurance, number of other things that we have worked to try to do. The circumstances are just beyond a lot of our control, and the stress and the anxiety of the pandemic and other things in society are going to cause people, not just in Northfield, but across the country, to choose something other than public service. I don't know how many people that will be yet. I'm hoping it's less than what I think it's going to be, but we will still have some attrition, but we cannot adequately tell you right now what that will be. Val, I don't know if you have any other ideas to add to that.
Good question. Any other questions or comments? Do you have a question, Julie?
No, I just wanted to thank you for the process that you're laying out, and I really like the thought or the idea around, or what I'm understanding is a really real-time interactive ability to make. It's not. I have been part of some of the budget prioritization process at that time of budget cuts as a community member back in early 2000s, and it's just it wasn't able to be as interactive. And so for everyone to be able to see that right away, I think that it's a real roll up your sleeves and work really hard to come up with the best solutions. And I'm confident that's what they will do, because it's a lot of really good people on those committees. So we have to thank them for their work for sure and their willingness to step up and do this, because this is not easy. And so we do really value that their time and appreciate that they're willing to step up and do this work for us. Thank you.
I think it's really important to share along that line that we've tried to develop a process that allows us to meet all of the criteria that we've outlined in our strategic commitments, right? Being respectful to people, making sure we're focused on learner outcomes, making sure that we're good stewards. This is what well-run financial organizations look like, right? You make the adjustments when you see they are needed to be made, as opposed to trying to dodge and weave and not deal with the hard issues at hand. So I think that from those first three strategic commitments, I think you see that we're after that significantly. We think about things like communication. It's very clear that we've continually communicated this to the public. Val and I were on KYMN radio a week ago tomorrow. I encourage you to listen to that, to provide that to the community. We're giving you updates here. When we think about equity, that is something that we are also making sure is part of that conversation. Does this treat people fairly and equitably, and making sure that we still are able to offer, to the best of our ability, equitable programs? And then you're clearly seeing the benefit of our partnerships, right? So those partnerships that we have, a lot of those partners are at the table helping us with these difficult discussions. So I think you're seeing those strategic commitments being played out here.
Thank you. Comment, question? Thank you so much. Oh, Amy.
So we're looking at $4.5 million over several years. So are you thinking it's like $1.5 million reduction the first year, and then another $1.5 million the second year, and then another $1.5 million, or what's the sense?
I think it'll depend on what the recommendations are. So we haven't, for the vast majority of the federal funds, they have to be spent by September 30th of 24. So I would anticipate the majority to be over the next 2 years, because that's our primary way to kind of step it in, if that makes sense. But depending on what the recommendations are, if it's something that does require a little more notice and planning, or, restructuring in some way, like, we would obviously try to accommodate that in a way that makes sense for the budget and for staffing and students. So I can't say for sure what I would project, because I think it will just kind of depend on what the groups come up with, but I would say the majority will happen in the next 2 years. We also know that the sooner you do, the more you do upfront, the longer that impact, because you're not allowing for those inflationary increases and things like that.
Thank you. Yep. Questions, comments? Okay, thank you, Val. Okay, finally, we have Dr. Holman giving us his superintendent operations and COVID-19 update.
Yes. So one of the better reports that I've gotten to give you about our COVID-19 situation in some time, as people obviously can see, many of us here are in this room where we have the option to choose to mask or not to mask. That is something the board approved at the last meeting. I want to report to you that transition in our schools has gone very well to this point, according to building principals, and being in each building and seeing the respectful and really positive way that we have made this transition has been very good. One piece I do want to share with you, board members, is that this afternoon I did email district families and shared with them that the federal regulation that governed requiring having masks on school buses was repealed or was removed. We learned about it over the weekend, and then we were making sure that we understood that the proper governing agency had made that, had removed that requirement. We were able to validate that last night. And so Benjamin Bust stopped enforcing the mask requirement on school buses today. We did communicate that with families this afternoon. And so that part is now in the past as well. One other item that I just want to share before I go into some of the data briefly is that as we continue to look at the data and the new guidelines that came from the CDC on Friday, we do know that they are now looking at the guidelines very differently. Schools and early childhood centers are no longer having their own separate set of guidelines for COVID-19 from the CDC. They have community guidelines. And so depending on the level of transmission within your community, which right now Rice County is in the lowest tier of that. All schools, child care centers, et cetera, are in the same set of recommendations as the community. So before, we sometimes had differing recommendations for schools versus the larger community. That is no longer the case from the CDC. We are still learning about those, and we are looking at how these the new data sets and the new recommendations will apply to the continued masking that we have planned at the Northfield Community Education Center. I anticipate that we'll be working with our incident command team very soon to make some additional updates to our protocols. And if we have to make those protocol changes in the interim between now and the next board meeting, I would make those under the authorization and consultation with the board chair, as you've authorized me to do so. And then we'd bring a set of updated protocols to the March 14th board meeting. So we aren't there yet. We are wanting to make sure. We've learned in the past that sometimes the CDC will release guidance and then a few days later they clarify that guidance. And so we just want to make sure that we have it down before we make any of those changes at the NCEC. So as you can see from the chart that was in the packet, of course, they updated the chart the next week going through February 19th. We were down to 90 or so cases for the week over week collection. We did not get to put that in your table file tonight. But really the great news is in that paragraph right underneath it, we are seeing just a substantial decline in cases. So as of February 24th, we had a total of 24 active cases reported in the previous 14 days. That's compared to going back to the last time I updated you, we had a total of 1,024 cases since going back to August 31st. And as of February 24th, this is last Thursday, that had only grown by 27 cases over that period of a few weeks, where the fact is that we were seeing literally in the hundreds, in January. So really positive news. That has also been validated by a significant reduction in the people using the district's testing center. We did have more tests today than we had in quite some time. We think people are just waiting. And but we still have seen very few testing pieces at our Q testing center. So this is all going in the right direction. Today, I updated the dashboard and I think we're at 18 active cases over the last 2 weeks. I don't remember the last time that 16. Oh yeah, sorry, I was 18 yesterday, so we're at 16. So who remembers the last time we were that low in those cases? And I think that is just an outstanding evidence of that we're in the right direction. And then I think the ILI rates are also just outstanding. What you saw the weeks of February 14th to the 18th, the week before, we saw the vast majority of schools under 1%, 2 schools that reported at less than 2%. And it was even better this past week when we updated it on Saturday morning. So we are having all of the COVID results going in the right direction. We've not seen a dramatic increase since we have gone with the masks recommended but optional approach. We do know there's a number of people who are worried about spring break, right? With people taking advantage of this relief that we have from COVID-19, people traveling. Our spring break is next week. Something that we're going to be encouraging families and students to do is to test. So if you're going away for spring break, all we want to do is when you come back, take one of our free tests just to make sure that we are not bringing people who have been exposed or positive, due to some of that travel. We know that when we had people do that in early January, that really helped us with that response to that initial surge that we had. And we think it was far better than it would have been otherwise. So what we're just asking is for folks, even if you're not going away, consider getting one of the free tests that you can get from your student's school. You can also pick them up during spring break from our district office. They are free. Just please do that favor for us. None of us want to have to reactivate any of our safety protocols. And if we can have people simply take that active testing before they come back, if we did have people who are positive, we can avoid mixing that into the student population, to the staff population. So we thank people in advance for acting responsibly, as we have known the Northfield community to do throughout the pandemic. Want to share with you we did have a professional development day on February 21st. And I just shared that district teaching staff participated in a couple of different sessions. All teachers continued their work on developing their racial equity skills and understanding with a 2.5-hour session led by Equity Alliance Minnesota. It was focused on culturally responsive teaching. Teachers did other sessions that day, like being trained for STAR reading assessment, which is a much more modern way that we can assess students right in the classroom for their reading abilities. The data is turned around immediately and teachers are able to use that data to modify their instruction or their approach to reading instruction in real time. So that's great. We had some work on conscious discipline. And then we also worked with some stakeholder teachers on communicating student progress and the district problem solving team approach. Want to also just give you a letters update. So as you recall, this program is a language essentials for teachers of reading and spelling. The cost of the training is funded through a grant from the Department of Ed. And we now have 48 staff members who are participating in that program. Do want to point out that there's some bipartisan support at the legislature for some additional funding for that program, proving that it works. I also shared with you in the announcements a number of pieces about Bright Spot for winter activities. So much of what I had in the report is a redux of that. And so really just proud of the winter activities, just having just an outstanding performance and just our teams really performing at a high level. So that is my report this evening.
Fantastic. Any questions or comments? Corey?
Dr. Hillman, for the tests that are available for community members, is it 2 tests per student still?
We are offering an unlimited number of tests to families. So, well, I shouldn't say unlimited. What the reasonable person would say is if you need tests, we are going to provide them for you. We have a substantial inventory, we'll put it that way. And we have both. We have the BD Veritor, which is that app-based test. And then we also have a substantial inventory of the Binax now, which does not require a cell phone to do the test.
Go ahead, Julie.
Thank you for the update. And some of the wonderful things happening and letters is certainly one of them. So 48 teachers.
Staff, because it includes, we have some administrators who
Oh,
are also
excellent.
participating.
So 48 staff, and those are staff that teaches grades 1 through 3, correct?
They are elementary teachers,
Or,
yes.
or involved with students 1 through 3, grade 1 through 3. So what is the timeline for completing the training?
Yeah, so I don't have that in front of me, Julie, but it is something that is, I don't have that timeline. I'm not
No,
gonna,
that's
it will
fine.
be completed before, my understanding is it'll mostly be completed. I will bring the timeline the next time
No,
because
that's fine. Has it started?
I do not believe that it has started yet.
Okay, no, it's really exciting. And I know the individual staff were contacted versus the district disseminating the
is correct.
information. And our staff jumped on it and they recognized it as a key, not only key to helping our students be successful, but also for their own professional development. So it's really excellent.
And we are also compensating folks who agree to this because we think that this professional learning is incredibly important. We want as many people to participate as possible. So we are compensating people for their time. Many districts would try to use substitutes or things like that. It's quite an intense amount of training and hours, and you have to, there are tests that you need to complete and pass in order to be able to move on to the next segment. There's several segments. And so we are compensating people for their time because this is really professional work and we want to make sure that we get as many people to do it as possible.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Corey?
Is the funding for that program routed through the district or is it directly, not to the given to the teachers, but is the program tied to their employment to us? Because if it extends into the next fiscal year and if they leave our district, can they still continue in the program?
Yeah, so Corey, there's 2 different parts to it. The state is funding the registration. So as a teacher or a principal in the state, you apply directly through the state's portal, and then they cover the cost of registration. So that tying to the employment in the district is not, that's not a factor. What we have done is we are going to meter out the stipend based upon when people complete certain segments, so that if we did have someone who took part of it and then did leave the district at the end of the year, they would be compensated for the time that they had done or the modules that they had been done to that point, but not anything further. So they could complete the training, but they would no longer be paid by us for those the stipend for things beyond their employment.
Good question. You have a question, Tom?
A quick one. Dr. Hillman, you said we have lots of COVID tests yet. Do they have expiration dates?
It's a great question. Yes, they do. And so we know that some of our BD Veritor tests do expire in April. Now, what I want to share with you is that those expiration dates, people, we forget that as long as we've been in this, it still has moved fairly quickly. So some of those expiration dates are based on the original or initial studies of how long the test kits were had a shelf life, if you will. And of course, these companies continue to do testing to see, are we able to still get valid results? We know that there are several testing companies who have extended their expiration dates because of their ongoing research and development. At this point, the BD Veritor tests that expire in April, we do not have anything to say that they will be extended beyond that date. So we are prioritizing those to begin with for people to be able to use. I think it's the middle of April, something like that, Anita.
Nice. Okay, Jeff.
Yeah, I have had a number of people ask me about the Northfield Community Education Center and the continued mandate for young children being masked. And it sounds to me like that might be something that you've gotten taken care of, or you might have a position on by the 14th. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're going to be reviewing the latest CDC guidance and the latest data, Jeff, and we anticipate meeting yet this week to make some determinations about what our next steps are. Don't want to be premature, but I do think that the new guidelines are an effective way for people to look at what our next steps might be.
More comments or questions?
And just want to emphasize on the NCEC that, you know, the biggest concern of the staff at the NCEC is making sure that they're able to keep the center open. We know one of the biggest disruptions for families has been how daycare, you can read about it in newspapers across the country about how the lack of predictability and how so many in-home and other daycare centers have had to close routinely because of a small number of cases. We've not had to close the center. That was where the staff and our recommendation came from, was to make sure that we could keep the center open. The key thing is that the data has continued to improve there. And so there are no active cases at the NCEC, and we have new guidance that would suggest that we could have some other options. So Jeff, I just wanted to, revisit why we kept it the way we kept it, and that we do anticipate seeing some updates to our protocols very soon.
Thank you. Okay, the next item on our agenda is committee reports. I don't have any committee reports that were submitted, so we're going to move on past that item. We're on to the consent agenda, and we will now move to onto approval of the consent grouping. As a reminder, there were some personnel items in the table file added to the consent grouping. Is there anything anyone would like to pull from the consent grouping for separate consideration? Okay, is there a motion to approve the consent grouping? Moved by Amy, second by Tom. All those in favor of approving the consent grouping, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Okay, next is items for individual action. And we have two items to take action on tonight. We heard from Director Murdersdorf last meeting. Our first item is the 2022-2023 operating capital and long-term facilities maintenance budgets. Is there a motion to approve the 2022-2023 operating capital and long-term facilities maintenance budgets? Moved by Amy, second by Tom. Okay, Val, would you like to review what you presented last meeting?
I'm happy to review it if you want me to. Otherwise, the only thing that I wanted to point out is part of actually, it might be in the next one. That might be part of the LTFM plan. We didn't actually talk about the indoor air quality plan at the last meeting, so I just wanted to make sure that we touched on that. But I think we can cover that on the next agenda item.
Okay, very good. Okay, is there any discussion from board members on this item? Okay, seeing none, then we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. All right, and now we're moving on to the long-term facilities maintenance 10-year plan. Do we have a motion to approve the long-term facilities maintenance 10-year revenue and expenditure plan and the indoor air quality management plan? Okay, but moved by Corey, second by Tom. Okay, so Val, do you want to talk about that indoor quality?
Sure, yep. And I'll ask Cole to come up because he definitely has more specifics than I do, but this is just a requirement of the 10-year plan that we bring it to the board. To my knowledge, there's no major changes, but it just is a item for transparency so that people are aware that we have a plan and we do in fact follow it. So do you have anything you want to add?
Thank you, Cole.
Yep, no, nothing major. Like I said, there was no any updates from last year, but I think it is important. We do send out a survey to all the district staff. And we get that report back, and then we work with our consultant IEA to go through that and to get the feedback and kind of group that per building, and then we kind of handle from there. So it's always good feedback. There is no major concerns. A lot of them are kind of comfort related, too hot, too cold, things like that. So no major concerns from there, and that's basically it. So.
Okay, are there any questions or comments? Okay, Jeff?
Yeah, as we do a deep dive into the high school, for lack of a better expression, I know I said 5 sections, as you kind of agreed with me. Really, if you go on the date, it's really, there's 6 different sections as far as the square footage that has been added. But I think that being Captain Obvious a little bit, if we're going to do the 10-year plan, I mean, you got to look at, it seemed HIVAC was huge on the list, air quality and whatever else like that. And going back to, the first part of the main high school was in 1964, about 180,000 square feet or whatever that was, and then 6,000 in 1970. So those 2 sections, and then, where's the most pain and where are we creating? And I think within, if obviously we're going to use our head and merge that 10-year plan with facilities with what's the smart thing to do with the high school. So you can keep using that 10-year plan money along with what are your proposed and hopefully funded if we go that way. Things to do at the high school or any other building for that matter. So, and I do want to say that we have a great lineup of buildings, and I, and I really do like, we've got, when you walk in, and I know a lot of people don't get to come over here and go into that, but I would like to see that we could have that lineup when you go into the district office, put it over somewhere because it's cool to look at. And I do, and I obviously date myself, but I went to school in this building. This thing, the old Longfellow building is built great, and with the new windows and everything in there, I mean, it looks great. So we can only work with whatever our construction limitations are, but I think we've got a good moving forward, and I appreciate the staff and everyone's efforts.
Thank you. Tom?
Will there be any potentially new changes for indoor air quality out of the pandemic, as in like maybe UV sterilization or other changes?
I think that those are all things to, consider. There is a lot of new, data that shows, different air quality, and we went through it with the, the MERV filters that we have. And obviously there's new designs such as Greenvale that's implemented into the new design, along with it, air turnover rates and all that kind of stuff. So I think it definitely has changed in the future, and there is, you have to weed through some of it because there's a lot of companies out there that, have stuff that may or may not work. So there is that as well. But I definitely think it has changed the way we look at indoor air quality and HVAC systems as a whole.
Good question. Any other questions or comments? All right. Thank you. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. All right, we are on to items for information. And Dr. Hellman, you have some comments about the March 14th board packet.
Yes, I just want to give board members just a preview of how we're going to handle the March 14th board meeting. Obviously, we have a different spring break this year than we have had in many years. Our spring break begins next Monday. Normally, we usually only have ever had one board meeting in March because our second board meeting would typically align with spring break. We had a lot of discussion about whether or not to have the March 14th board meeting. It's the first day after spring break. We know that our district office really likes to keep the business of the district moving. And so we determined that we would hold that meeting so that people have an opportunity to rest and to be able to go away and rejuvenate for the remainder of the school year. We are going to publish the board agenda as required well in advance in a very slim packet, most likely by the end of this week, something to start. But what I just want to share with you, what we do post that, whether it's at the end of this week or early next week, be well ahead of the normal time. We usually publish that on the Thursday before the board meeting. It's going to be a slimmer pack than what you normally see, and then you can anticipate some items being in the table file on Monday. We'll do everything we can to keep those to be non-controversial, more update kinds of things. One thing that I want just you to know will be in the table file because of the timing of the bids is the high school office remodeling. So we've been working on that process for several months. The bids come in between what the normal packet publication time and the table file. So there'll be a little bit more in the table file next time than normal. And we just want to explain to you and the community as to why it'll be a slimmer packet published for the next board meeting.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Amy?
Just was wondering if for some of those things that might be in the table file, but you have them ready at the normal time, but it's not as early as you're publishing everything else. Is there any way that we can get them sooner than just a few hours before the meeting?
Yes, if there are things that are updated between the time that we publish the packet and the table file, what I can certainly do is send those out to board members. And I can also publish those to the website. They would still be included in the table file, right? But we could potentially we can publish them early as they come in.
Okay, well, this concludes our business meeting tonight. Thank you, board members, for all your work. Our next meetings will be Monday at 6 p.m. on March 14th, March 28th, and April 11th in the district boardroom. Is there a motion to adjourn? Moved by Noel, second by Amy. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries or adjourned.